folks love the work. It resonates with them. They print it out, they hang it in their home or their office or their kids' room. And like that, to me, is the reason why I make art, to be able to connect with other people, because that's how I know how to communicate best. So that's awesome.
NFTs are redefining the cryptocurrency landscape and taking the world by storm. This is Ashley Smith from Fame Lady Squad, and I want to welcome you to From the Blockchain. As leaders of an all-female avatar NFT project, we want to share our insight and industry knowledge with you. We want to empower more women to participate and dominate in the NFT space. So whether you're an early adopter or just a curious learner, we hope you join us to explore the exciting world of NFTs. Hello, everybody. Welcome to From the Blockchain. This is your girl, Board Becky, also known as Ashley in real life, and I'm here with Lady C, aka Cara, aka Actor Extraordinaire. Been super busy doing some really cool things. Cara, how are you doing?
I mean, doing the thing. As you know, we were we're coming out of the post-COVID time, sort of, I hope. And it was really cool to be at home working with you guys and getting really into Web3. And now my actor life has kind of asked me to go back to that a little bit. And I've been playing with Shakespeare and like Jacobean works from like 1500, 1800. So my brain's a bit like, what's going on? But I'm really glad to see your face right now and touch base on the future. But I'm literally emerging out of the past. So,
oh my God. Well, no, that's awesome. This is Women in Web3 life. And like, we're just trying to balance and do all of the things. I'm not sure, you may not know, because I mentioned it in the intro to the last episode with Sarah Bauman. And I was talking to myself, but one of our key contacts at Hug, Michael, saw you in New York doing your thing and said it was really awesome. So I thought that was so cool. And one of these days I need to come see you perform.
Awesome. I'm so
wonderful.
I'm so glad that Michael showed up, because like it's one of those great ways that our worlds intersect. Like, you know, like some people from real estate, being a real estate agent yourself, and Michael and he's part of Theater Me Too, and so he understands that kind of other side of my world, and we've totally met in the Web3 land, and that's been great. But also, speaking about balancing, how is life being a mom, being a brand new mom in Web3?
Oh my goodness. I'm gonna be real. Like it's a challenge. The brain fog is real, and when you're trying to like stay focused and stay on top of the to-do list, and when a lot of this is about ideas and executing on ideas, it's like it's work. But I'm really happy to have the opportunity to do it, and it's been really fun. And I'm just happy to be part of these days and be able to like explore it all. And post-COVID, to your point, be able to get away with doing things in a way that previously may not have been as acceptable. Like I did wash my hair today, but that's not always the case. You might not be able to tell. But anyways, you know what? It's crazy because it's hard to stay on top of everything. And that's hopefully like what we're looking to do with this podcast, is help with staying on top of things to the best of our abilities. But things are just, even in this bear market, things are moving at a crazy pace in terms of like the innovation, the disruption, et cetera. We're going to talk a little about that today. We just learned something new today that we're going to get into. But first, I definitely want to introduce our guests, so our audience knows what they're going to be waiting for here. Had such an awesome time with this upcoming interview with Amber Vittoria, who's an artist that I admire so much in this space. She's definitely, to her credit, gotten a lot of recognition in Web3. She's an artist through and through. She's been doing her thing for some time. It's not like NFTs happened and suddenly she decided, I'm going to give this a go. She's been, grinding as an artist, doing her thing for a long time. But I'm really, really happy that she's, been given some spotlight that she has. And she really does, we don't like to pigeonhole women, but she definitely shines as a woman in the space and tries to make room for women in the space, which I really appreciate. I will give a little formal bio because we didn't do that in the show, but just so everyone knows, Amber Vittoria is an artist, poet, and author, currently now working in Los Angeles, California, previously in New York. Through abstracted form, ribbons of color, and joyous words, her work aims to represent the nuances of womanhood. I personally love her work and her use of color. I think it's as someone who has liked art but not appreciated it the way I have grown to. I just love her style. It's very distinctive. I think when you see her pieces, you know it's her. I do own a couple of her pieces through NFTs and plan to print some of them. Talk about that a little bit in the show. And she's one of the few people that in my Twitter I have in my timeline her alerts turned on, and partly it's just because her time or her feed her posts brighten up my feed, and I like it, and it's good for my mental health. But Cara, you're familiar with Amber, I'm assuming.
I have a piece of hers that I like. I stayed up late at night when the market when we were still kind of in a bull market, and I waited until like ETH had dropped low enough. I kept my eye on a piece. I scooped it up. I'm very proud of it. It's part of a series, but it is a one of one because she does do collections, and the collections are always beautiful too. And like I'm in her Discord, which I'm very proud of, but I am a huge Amber Vittoria fan. I think she's a great artist, but she's also she's well aware of her brand, and she's very well aware of how to market. Like she handles her Discord on her own. And I'm always so like, I'm really not proud, but I'm inspired by how she's been able to handle herself in the space and make herself known. And she has a book that came out, and she's done a lot of really fantastic collaborations. And exactly like you were saying, her art is so distinctive. And I'm excited in the future to see other people own a piece and just say that's an Amber Vittoria piece, because you'll just know it. So I'm so glad that this interview took place, and I think she's
yeah. Yeah, so just if you're wanting to listen forward, just a couple things we get into. Obviously, we hear about her past, her journey as an artist, her journey into Web3 as an artist, and exploring NFTs from that creator side, exploring the different way she can bring her art to the world, different types of editions, what they mean, some of the nuances in Web3 in terms of like how some of the things that come up as an artist you may not expect. And that's when you're kind of hitting the trader economy. So we get into some of the fun of that. And she breaks down a lot of the things and why she finds like making art accessible so important, which I think was great. And it's funny, at one point in the chat, kind of almost missed, but I wanted to ask her about the creator royalty conversation in the Web3 space, because really that's, NFTs and art and NFTs has really presented an opportunity for artists to get paid for their work, be recognized for their work, and in a perpetual, ongoing way, and to be the beneficiary in some way, long after their creation's been made. And you'll hear in this episode that, we talk about it. We talk about some thinking behind it, and also acknowledge that, this was a big conversation some months back, and the conversation around it sort of has dwindled, and that not as controversial. And I think, for many of us, while we can appreciate that secondary sale fees or royalties or whatever you want to call it may not be the best and only way for businesses to be thinking about Web3, because it's certainly, for a variety of reasons, is not likely to support full on, entrepreneurial endeavors. But as an artist, to be paid, I think we can all appreciate that there's huge value in that. And there's really even some might say an ethical question in that. And anyways, fast forward a week. We recorded this about a week ago. Today is February 17th. And about an hour ago, as I'm scouring OpenSea, I see a ribbon on the top of the website saying that we've temporarily put our OpenSea fees to zero. percent, which usually it's 2.5%. And that's not creator fees. That's the platform's fees for trading on it. It's one of the ways, primary ways that they monetize. And I thought that's interesting. And then recognize, oh, well, there's been other platforms, obviously getting into the marketplace platforms, getting into the space. Blur is the big one over the last several months and over the last week has been huge for reasons that we'll get into here. And I thought, oh, I should go see on OpenSea's Twitter, what's going on here. Maybe this is a bigger conversation. We learned a few things and things that actually contradict some of the things we talked about in our conversation that you're about to all hear. Cara, maybe can you give us just a super high level overview of what did OpenSea say? Maybe the tweets and the top 3 points in their tweet.
Sure, I'm checking it out right now. So first of all, the OpenSea fee is going to be 0% for a limited time, which is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is they're moving to optional creator fees. And in brackets, they wrote 0.5% minimum for all collections without on-chain enforcement, old and new. And then the third point is that marketplaces with the same policies will not be blocked by the operator filter. I mean, this is big because, to your point, this was a discussion that we had last year, and it was kind of out of Solana talk, like Magic Eden and a few other Solana marketplaces deciding to get rid of or to make optional creator fees. So as a purchaser, you could buy it on the secondary market and decide how much you want to pay the project that had initially to pay the creator royalties. And it seems that it seems like this just might be a response to Blur, based on, Blur just recently took place. You might have more to say about that, Ashley, but they did a big drop of the Blur token to about 100,000 NFT traders on Tuesday. I'm looking at an article by Decrypt right now. And then on Wednesday, they advised NFT project creators to block OpenSea trades. And it seems that term, blocking the OpenSea trades, might be that direct response of marketplaces with the same policies as OpenSea will not be blocked. So it's really interesting. It feels kind of impulsive, don't you think? It feels reactionary.
It's a good question. I mean, it's tough to say when you're not behind the scenes, and just everyone take what we're saying with a grain of salt because we're not experts in all of this. But what I remember when this conversation had really gotten big some time back, and then a lot of creators and artists kind of pushed back, really advocating, championing secondary royalties for creators. And OpenSea, I think, had invited some of these folks to come talk to them. I do feel based on my memory, that OpenSea at that time said, at this time, we've decided we're going to maintain sort of the status quo. But I don't know why. There was something in the tone there that suggested that they want to keep creator fees. That's something they'd like to do, but they're just not sure if in the long term, if it's going to be the solution, if there's other marketplaces that have different offerings and where folks, especially people who are day trading and looking to make profits, and sometimes those profit margins are quite small. And so to make a flip, you're taking in all these percentages and trying to break down what's it going to mean. And so I think there was still that sense of depending on the landscape, and Blur, it's just the next. I don't know a lot about Blur. Okay, so caveat, I don't have much to say, good or bad. I know people have been really excited about it to some extent, but I still feel it's been I haven't spent a lot of time. I hate to say almost feeling like a boomer over here, feeling cozy with the platform I'm comfortable with already, right? And so I haven't spent a lot of time getting outside of that box. But anyhow, the limited time we've been able to research this, which has not been a lot. The term I'm seeing is marketplace wars. That's marketplace wars.
I want to add to that because OpenSea had a second tweet that follows the initial one of the changes that they're making. And they wrote, number 2, context. And they said there's been a massive shift in the NFT ecosystem. In October, we started to see meaningful volume and users move to NFT marketplaces that don't fully enforce creator earnings. Today, that shift has accelerated dramatically despite our best efforts. And I think Marketplace Wars is a great way to put it, because keeping in mind that if OpenSea is taking 0% for a limited time, that means that they will not be making anything potentially during this time on some of those sales. And so, yeah, I can't help but think of it as an artist. And there's, I think about like gentrification, even where you have artists come into places that have kind of been left behind. They do their thing, they make the place really interesting. And then business comes back in again and starts to like push off the art and utilize the space for business. And I can't help but feel like with this, by marketplaces competing by removing the creator fees from the artists, it feels like a digital version of that. So in the beginning, you invite the artists in to make the place really pretty, but we start to find bigger businesses play in the space, and the artist starts to become a little less important, for lack of a better term. So I'm like, it's really sad, but I'm also not super surprised by it. It'll be interesting to see, like, do the artists then join bigger businesses? Like, do they create artwork for Ferrari and then Ferrari pays them off and deals with the lack of a creator fee on NFTs in the marketplace? I don't quite know how that entirely spills out, but Marketplace Wars is a great way to put it.
Yeah, I do think there's something here. First of all, I want to say I support creator fees, especially when it comes to creators of art and music and those sorts of things. So I'm just going to put that out there. However, I can appreciate the business side and the conundrum. I don't know OpenSea people, but I can appreciate that they're probably in a very difficult position, especially if they want to provide value to the space. They, obviously businesses are in business to make money. Yes, I get it. There's people I think can easily jump to talking about things like greed and not caring and ethics and all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, how can a platform continue to put value and build and make the infrastructure better, et cetera, if they're not able to compete? And so that's the question. So that's the problem. So we'll see how, these folks and perhaps other platforms decide to solve that problem, because there's probably other ways. And people might not be happy about what those ways look like either. But there is something to be said about this whole on-chain enforcement of creator fees, which to the best of my understanding, which is limited, is that that's basically something that's written into the smart contract. And I don't know, like, my understanding is early days, that was not the practice. I don't know why. I think there might have been some technical challenges. I also have to wonder if it's written on chain, like maybe then that means you can't change it. So for example, if you sell a company or you pass away and you're redirecting, I don't know. I'm a total newbie amateur talking about this, but there are technical things that need to be thought through. And I'm sure, again, there's solutions for all of this stuff. But these are the early days, Wild West still, right? Things can change on a dime. We can do an interview and a podcast, and a week later, the context is different. I want to keep talking about this, but I think maybe as we learn more, we understand the feedback, we understand the decisions and where it all goes, I think it'll be an interesting conversation to follow. There was one other thing, and we don't want our intro to be like so heavy and long, but maybe we can just like quick highlight, high level, other thing going on in the NFT space. There's now what people are calling, quote unquote, like Bitcoin NFTs. Ordinals is the word, on-chain layer one, quote unquote, NFT system for Bitcoin. And I get it, ordinal inscriptions, similar to NFTs, are digital assets inscribed on a Satoshi, the lowest denomination of a Bitcoin. So there's the technical side that they've already lost me. But the general sense is they can put images, video games, other content associated or assigned to Bitcoin. And the thing is right now, it's funny because we were actually approached, hey, do you guys want to do something? You talk about innovation. Do you want to do like a small collection on like this new chain? It is very challenging still. It's still very, very early days. There's no marketplace for it. I learned a new language that I probably should have known already, this idea of OTC. I'm like, I Google, what is OTC? And OTC, I guess, is a term that's used in stocks as well. It's over the counter. So there's no marketplace. It's private. I come from real estate. I think of it more as a FSBO, for sale by owner. So it's private sale. It needs to be trusted. It's not trustless, as you would think about with these marketplaces, right? So you need to trust other people when you're trading that the trade's actually going to happen. So there's still a lot of risk, I guess, involved here. And to my understanding, you can buy these ordinals without a node, but in order to sell them or create them or trade them, you need a node. So it's really still early days. However, people are already playing around with it. There was big news this past week that a Bored Ape owner burned their Bored Ape to move it, quote unquote, move it from Ethereum to Bitcoin. Bored Ape number 1626 was burned to symbolically shift its existence to Bitcoin. But Yuga Labs, the team behind Bored Ape, says it's an illegitimate ape. And so that's an interesting convo that I think we could get into. There's a bunch of questions around this. We could shoot the shit for a minute, I think, about this topic. I'm seeing Cara laughing, so I want to know her thoughts.
I love the idea of an illegitimate ape. Like, and especially it's such a flip because I mean, just last year you've got Bitcoin maxis saying that like NFTs are illegitimate in terms of the crypto space and everything. And I like it because it allows the Bitcoin maxis to start to play with NFTs. I am curious because nobody really talks about the Bitcoin blockchain as a decentralized app, the way that the Ethereum blockchain is and the whole NFT thing. So, the idea of like symbolic NFTs are fascinating to me as well. I'm excited. I mean, it allows a lot of, I feel like, and this might be my bias, but I feel like BTC owners are people who own gold. So you just kind of have it and you lock it up until you're ready to cash out and potentially buy onto other chains. But this, it does make me wonder if like Jack from Twitter, the previous owner, if he and Jay-Z are potentially going to buy or create an ordinal, like just for
and that's the thing, right? I think that this is a whole new ecosystem. And I think to your point, like Bitcoin was put together and built as a store of value. It wasn't intended, like, I think this crypto sphere has evolved well beyond what people had originally expected. Like it doesn't have the smart contract level of sophistication in the technology, so to speak. And so there's people I don't have their names in front of me, but these, creative smarty pants people, degens, have come in and figured out the tech to make it work and function in a way to mimic, similarly to what, say, Ethereum has for NFTs. And so, of course, people are now releasing new ordinals that are new, which is interesting. But this whole idea of shifting, like, assets from Ethereum to Bitcoin in this way without the, founding project owners or whatever being part of it. Basically, the idea is if you burn your NFT, actually that NFT still exists. And so it's just that no one technically owns it, but that means you've kind of relinquished your right to the intellectual property. And so now you're kind of duplicating it in a way that isn't, at least at this point, hasn't been approved. and by the way, you wouldn't be necessarily, if you're thinking about doing something like this, because I'm seeing more and more people talking about it, you wouldn't necessarily be able to be the beneficiary of future benefits as a holder of that thing. But I think people are experimenting. Obviously, this person that did this particular act has the position in life where they can just let go of an asset like that, and they're betting on that might be worth something down the line. It's kind of art in a way. It's almost like an act of art. But I think he joked and was quoted about saying it's like burning a Lambo.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a great point, because as much as it's in the world of cryptocurrency, that person, like, pragmatically, if we really look at what has happened, they have not just sold, but they've burnt their contract. They've burnt the deed to the house, and now they've photocopied it in, like, on something entirely different, but now it's more owning a photocopy of something. So you're right, there's no real connection to Yuga Labs anymore, because that contract is dead, and you've essentially you've just taken a picture of what you once had and put it on Bitcoin. But if you're a collector, like right now, I'm really thinking, like, how hard is it I would love possibly to have one of my NFTs on a Bitcoin.
It might be it's a good point. It could be a fun experiment for sure. And maybe if you're like the first of some collection and you're willing to like that's maybe kind of cool.
That's kind of how we got here, chasing
right?
the first of something. So it's definitely up my alley.
There you go. Okay, so there you have it, everybody. A lot going on in the space. We had other things we wanted to talk about. Maybe we can chat about it on the next round. Things kind of in the social media sphere, Web 2.5 kind of maybe happening. But we'll get to it next time. Everyone, please, I hope you really enjoy this conversation with Amber Vittoria. She's wonderful. All her links are going to be in here that you can make sure to follow it, and make sure to subscribe to us if you're not already, by the way. Subscribe to From the Blockchain, whether you're on audio, video, Twitter, find us, Fame Lady Squad, of course, on all of the platforms. And we also want a special thank you to Daz 3D, our primary sponsor for the show. But with that said, since we are at the end of a 25-minute introduction, because that's what was needed today, without further ado, please enjoy this episode of From the Blockchain. Amber Vittoria, welcome to the show. I am so happy to have you here. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
We were obviously just chatting a little bit before we got rolling, and I was just saying, like, this is long overdue. You're someone that we would have liked to have had on the show a long time ago. We should have asked you much earlier. You really are such an inspiration in the space, and you've really built a name for yourself, obviously, in your area of work. And it's been really neat to kind of watch from afar. I'm certainly I think as a personal quote unquote collector, my interest in art has definitely developed and strengthened as I've gone through this journey with NFTs. And for those who don't know you, I think it's important to acknowledge that as an NFT artist, you certainly are offering something that's quite different than what maybe a lot of people think of when they think about NFTs. And that's really just because you have a unique style. It's not this PFP type of work that we're, often used to talking about. So before we dive in, I would love to just hear from your mouth, kind of describing your work and yourself as an artist.
Yeah. First, you don't need to put your collectors in air quotes. If you collect art, you're an art collector. I think a lot of times within the trad art world, people only view collectors as people that have massive, expensive collections. And I think that if you collect art, regardless if it's a print or a painting, you're an art collector. So thank you. Mm-hmm. And thank you for having me. This is so cool. I am predominantly a painter. I also work digitally before learning about the world of NFTs. And still, even though I'm in NFTs, the majority of my work is abstract, and it speaks to the idea of celebrating the nuances of emotion and womanhood. I've been really fortunate to partner and work with a lot of brands on creating artwork for advertising and for product that speak to that theme. And then, coming into the NFT space, it's been really incredible to sell my work as fine art. That's something that has been a goal of mine for a long time. did not think that it would come to fruition so early in my career, but I'm very thankful that it has.
Mm-hmm. I think you have such a unique, distinctive style. I would love if you could just. We're obviously going to be on YouTube, and we can put links to so people can have a look at your work. But for those who are listening on audio platforms, can you give us just a general descriptor of the type of work that they might expect, at least in the NFT space?
Yeah, so all of my work, regardless if it's digital or hand painted, very colorful. Some of it involves gradients, some of it is flat color. It uses a lot of geometric shapes and asymmetry to build compositions. And the goal when looking at my work is to feel relaxed and invited into the content behind the painting or the digital piece. Majority of my paintings do have a poem that are tethered to them. And the poem usually speaks on some aspect of emotion or being a human being in this world. And the painting usually tethers with it in a way that is a jumping off point for people that are viewing it. So it's been really lovely to see people resonate not only with the poem, but also with the paintings as well.
Mm-hmm. So we should also probably mention that you have released works of poetry and you have a book as well
Yeah.
that people can find. Can you tell us a little bit about that work?
Yeah, so my first published book is called These Are My Big Girl Pants, and it speaks about the nuances of womanhood and, coming into yourself, whether you're coming of age and you're a teenager, growing older, or you're an adult and you're finding a new aspect of yourself as you evolve as a person. And those paintings were done almost 2 years ago now. Majority of them haven't been seen until the book was published, which was exciting. Just speaks on the idea of getting older in life and what that entails and has entailed for me so far. And you can find it at most major retail outlets for books, which is really cool.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to put a link in the show notes. I have to say, of course, I just love the title of your book as well. It's just, it's very, I don't know, it just, as a woman, it just resonates and it makes me want to open it up. Um,
Yay.
Yeah. So let's look back a little bit before we start kind of diving a little bit more into where you are now and where you're going. Um, why don't we talk a bit about your journey into like as an artist, but also into Web3? I know that you worked for Vayner. I made notes here and they're not in front of me, but I think it was 2014 to 16, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. Exactly.
Yeah. And you work with brands prior to that, I think Victoria's Secret. So you want to maybe give a little bit of an overview for our audience, just where you're coming from?
Yeah, so the last decade in a few minutes starts with me going to Boston University's College of Fine Arts. I studied graphic design and printmaking. And the reason why I love that program so much is because it's so heavily rooted in fine arts. Even though I'm trained as a graphic designer, majority of my courses were of oil painting and sculpture with clay and printmaking and drawing. So I think that a lot of that comes back in my work now, a full decade later. When I graduated, I moved back home, which was an hour and a half north of New York City, and I worked at a few places. In between those places, I ended up moving to the city. The first place was Victoria's Secret as a web designer, and then VaynerMedia as a designer, and then an art director, and then Avon as a web designer before I quit and started freelancing full time. And then throughout those like 6-ish years, I would always freelance nights and weekends trying to find work back in the day on Craigslist, which is very risky, but pre-social media. And then as social media became more prevalent, finding different brands on Instagram and on Facebook and Pinterest that I think would be of a visual interest and connection to partner with. And then in 2017, I quit my job at Avon and I started working full-time as an artist, making a lot of different work with brands, selling my own work as prints. I've been doing that for the last little over 5 years, which has been really cool.
How did that feel going into full-time freelance? Like, did you see yourself prior to this as an entrepreneur?
No, I still don't view myself as an entrepreneur. I work for myself and I make art. I'm very fortunate that people enjoy it and pay me for it. I definitely think that in terms of like outreach, I guess that's a little bit more of like the quote unquote entrepreneurial spirit. A lot of the work that I found and still find, especially with brands, is because I do the outreach myself. I don't wait for people to reach out to me, even though that's very nice. I love when that happens. But yeah, I still won't view myself as an entrepreneur. I just make art.
Well, that's fair. I mean, I'm not going to label you, but I do think that it's one of those terms that I think a lot of people feel weirdly imposter syndrome about. I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, because especially though, because like especially on Twitter, everyone in their bio is like entrepreneur, and you're like, what does that mean anymore? I don't even know if that has meaning, given that everybody uses it. So I think that yeah, I'm a small business owner.
You are. You are a small business. Well, possibly a big business owner. I think that everything that we see, from my lens, which will be admittedly somewhat narrow because I pay attention to the things that I'm interested in, and I'm sure there's a much bigger world, at least in the digital art and NFT space that I'm aware of. But I feel like you're everywhere. Your name is everywhere. Whenever something's going on, you're incorporated. So you were one of the first artists to be launched through Instagram's program platform. Maybe since I've brought it up, why don't we touch on that just for a second so people can learn a little bit more? When did Instagram launch their digital collectibles offerings?
They started in November, and it was to an invited group of artisan creators. And I do believe, I mean, I'm not too sure that the goal, given that usually Instagram's history, they test with a small group and then expand to everybody. I'm assuming this is going to be on that similar trajectory. But I did a small edition that released in early November, which is really nice. It was so much less pressure than drops that I've done in the past, just because it was really seamless. It felt like you're posting a reel or a static post on Instagram and not, selling something. And that was really refreshing, and that people could pay with their credit card instead of having to save up ETH or TES, or depending on the chain that you're using. It felt a lot more closely connected to how we collect and consume things outside of blockchain technology. So as an artist that sells my work, it didn't feel complicated. So that was really nice. So hopefully they roll it out to everybody soon, because I would like to do it again.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would love to hear your thoughts on also just the audience, or dare I say consumer side of that. Just your thoughts on the, I don't know, nuance to maybe working in a more Web2 traditional environment in that way versus this more what might feel sometimes very insular Web3 ecosystem. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that there, especially as of late, there's been a lot of, as people call it, meta about timed editions or open editions, and how artists are cash grabbing for selling their work. And that's not something that has existed. I guess kind of, you always hear the term sell out as a negative, but not as heavily as it is in Web3. So it was really refreshing selling. And it's an edition of 10. It was a very small edition. Selling my work as an edition on Instagram, nobody was like, oh, this is a cash grab. It's like, no, I'm an artist. I make my work and I sell my work, and no one is forcing you to buy it if you don't want it. Whereas in Web3, I feel like there's this growing sense of entitlement, that it's like, you can't make money unless I make money off of your hard work. And that is odd to me, because yes, eventually, if you look at the history of art and art collecting, yes, some art does appreciate in value over time. But I think people forget that they're buying a product because it lives digitally. And it's really unfortunate to see not only myself, but a lot of other artists be, scolded for being able to support ourselves off of our work, when historically society does not support or champion artists until after we're gone. So it's really nice to see artists be able to thrive and survive and make their work and connect with people, whether they collect their work or not, and to be able to support themselves in that way. So it's really sad to kind of see that backslide. And, people feel entitled to an artist because they were able to support themselves off their work. So the long answer is, it was nice that in Web2, I feel like that expectation isn't there. It's like, yes, I love your work. I can afford it. I'm going to collect this edition and I'm happy to hold it. Whereas I feel like in Web3, it's like, okay, now when can I make money off of this? And it's like, it just released 10 minutes ago. It's an object, like no one forced you to buy it. So I hope that gap kind of bridges. So the positive of Web2 is people know that they're buying a product from an artist that they love. And in Web3, I don't know if we're there yet.
Yeah, it's funny just hearing you speak. A few different things come to mind. And I almost think that you're in a peculiar position as an artist that I think has become quite well known in Web3. And so there's probably a lot of sort of extra expectation when buyers are buying from you or minting from you. They're really thinking about speculation in that way
Yeah.
because they think you've already established your name. Your name means something. I'm going to
And
buy it.
yeah, and I love to remind people that I'm very much an early career artist. I'm going to be 33 in a few months. Even if I were older, I still am very much an early career artist. I also love to remind people too, especially in my Discord, it's like you're collecting a piece from me as if you would collect a physical print or collect a painting. Like that is it. If like do your own research, non-financial advice, asterisks, all that fun stuff, but like speculating, especially short-term speculating on anything is a high risk, especially in an asset class that's not regulated. And so I think it's frustrating when people don't take that accountability. Well, it's like, yep, I'm going to buy this thing. It's very risky. And if it doesn't go up in value in 5 seconds, that's my own fault. And it just sounds so funny to say that, because if you talk to anybody outside of the world of NFTs, they're like, yeah, that's how things go. You are the one deciding to buy it. So as much as I'm so grateful for my work resonating with so many people, I still have to remind a lot of people that not many people know who I am. Like, yes, you see my work on like products and in advertising, and I'm very thankful for those opportunities, but I'm still a very early career artist. And I think there are a lot of artists that are also very early career that behave as if they're late career. And I think that's also confusing as well. It's like, you've just started selling your work in this way, or fine art in general. Like it's only been a year or two, and that's nothing. And I think that a lot of it plays to the idea, going back to like entitlement and ego. And I understand that those things are part of who we are. We're people, and those emotions are very much interwoven with every other emotion that we have. But sometimes I think they're on display a little bit too much, which can make the space a little less enjoyable for people that just want to sell their art and connect with people over their art. So
it's also, I think, a new world where artists are having this two-way conversation with people who are, and then I'll use the word consumer, because a collector might be someone looking to collect and hold and showcase a piece, where someone who's trading may very well just be I might put them in the cold category of consumer, right? And so it's different, and then the expectation of this kind of two-way conversation and immediate feedback. I don't think we have to dive super deep into all that, but I do think for those who are listening, especially for artists who are thinking of getting into this space, these are the kinds of things I think that folks might want to be thinking about as preparing themselves a little bit for the sort of culture.
Yeah, or just being very like clear and intentional with what you're doing. I think that's what's been helpful to me when anyone's like, hey, like, why hasn't this collection gone up? Why has it gone down? It's like people speculated on it, and now they're moving on to the next thing they want to speculate on. I am an artist. I'm selling artwork. And that has really helped. And I'd say overall, the feedback is usually very positive.
Yeah.
Folks love the work. It resonates with them. They print it out, they hang it in their home or their office or their kids' room. And like that, to me, is the reason why I make art, to be able to connect with other people, because that's how I know how to communicate best. So that's awesome. Yeah. I just do think it, like you said, this is kind of like this new world where we're collecting things digitally, and with that comes growing pains. So those growing pains, I do think, are things that over time will fall by the wayside, especially as more people join and like, yes, I want to collect art. I live in a small apartment. I can't put it on my walls because I have 4 walls, which was very much me until I moved to California and have more than one room. But I want to be able to collect art and support artists, and you can do that digitally, and you don't have to worry about storing it, or if it gets ruined, or when you move, it can all live in your wallet. And I think as more people realize that and join and collect art in that way, the speculation and hype aspect of collecting art, I think, will quiet down over time. It's just have to have patience for that.
Well, I'm one of these people. My studio over the last 6 months has been pretty questionable because I'm at my folks' place while we're renovating our apartment. and I'm
That's
going
awesome.
home soon. And once we get situated, I have some Amber Vittoria pieces that I'm very excited to
Yay.
showcase in my home. So
Oh,
if you
thank
follow me
you.
on social, you'll see a post at some point. So I'm excited about that. I would love to know, Amber, when did you jump into Web3? Like, did you jump in playing around as a collector to understand it, or were you into crypto, or was your first kind of getting your feet wet in minting your own work?
So when I started freelancing in 2017, I was 27. And I don't know what came over me, but I'm like, I'm gonna buy a little bit of Bitcoin, a little bit of Ethereum, and this blockchain technology is awesome. I feel like it's going to change how everything works. Everything's going to live on chain. I didn't think it would happen and be life changing that early after that. Like a couple of years later, I thought, man, when I'm like in my 40s or 50s, like, everything will be on chain. Your rent, your lease, or your, car, everything will live on chain. So that's why I bought a little bit. And quickly thereafter, a few of my husband's friends were talking about CryptoPunks, and a lot of them work at Vayner or had worked at Vayner. So I feel like, Gary is a big CryptoPunk proponent, collector. And so my husband Dave was like, we should look at these. They're NFTs. They live on chain. It's like, oh, they're like crypto kitties, but they don't have to be cats. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, these are really cool. Let's buy a bunch of them. And then we learned that at that time, they were priced as like a car. And I was like, a car for an image? I was like, what? That's insane.
Yeah.
So I was like, let me think about it. Because at that time, we were like pre-vaccine in New York. We were going to get a car so we could drive and see our parents instead of renting cars to see our parents safely. And like, let me just think about it. So over the weekend, that I believe they announced that vaccines were rolling out in the state of New York, which would make it a lot easier because we could just take Metro North to see our parents, like pre-pandemic times. And I was like, you know what? If we don't buy a car, I guess we could get one. So we got one CryptoPunk, which we still have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just one of those things that we got the one that looks most like a punk. As I told Dave, like whichever one looks most punk-like. I don't know, mohawk. Wish ours has a mohawk. Like, get that one. So that's really how it started. And then I started reading about artists, selling their work for insane sums of money on chain. And I was like, I remember reading an article, I think, about Ferocious, or saw something on TV. And I was like, this is really cool. Like, not only are artists able to sell their work and support themselves while they're alive, like people in this space are championing younger artists, which usually does not really happen. So that was really exciting. And I was like, maybe I should sell some of my stuff and make back some of this money that we just spent on this punk. So I sold a few things and minted a few things in February, March of 2021. Which was really exciting. A huge barrier, though, is a lot of my work is physical, and people were uncomfortable, sharing their mailing address, rightfully so. A lot of people were anonymous. And so I kind of paused and I was like, well, I don't want to keep doing this and making people feel uncomfortable being like, let me send you the art. And they're like, look. So I paused and I studied how other artists were behaving in the space. And I saw a lot of digital only work was really resonating. And I do digital work, especially for clients, just because it's a lot easier if they are printing it on a garment, or if it's like in and out of home ad, or they're manipulating it for advertising. So it's like I could make fine art just digitally instead. And that's when things started to take off for me, when I started to sell my work whereas digital only. People didn't need to share any personal information about themselves with me for painting. And since I think people realize that I'm not going to like rob their homes. And so now people have bought paintings from me, and I've sent them to them, and it comes with an NFT. So it's been really, humbling and life-changing to be able to, so early in my career, incorporate fine art into my practice and not just commercial art.
No, that's wonderful. I appreciate your insight. I was wondering how you go about deciding, which project you want to work on at a given time, and your approach. Because clearly, I can see you have pieces that are hand drawn or hand painted, and they're living, digitally as well. So today, now that you have these variety of options, how do you go about choosing what you want to work on at that moment?
Yeah. So a goal of mine has always been to make artwork accessible. I feel like, I can't do it with all artwork, but I could do it with my artwork. And oftentimes, some of my favorite artists, like Jenny Saville or Barbara Kruger, I can only see their work in a museum. And if I'm lucky, the LACMA has both of their LACMA or the Broad. No, the Broad has both of their work. Clearly, I just moved to Los Angeles, but I also feel like people want to have artwork in their homes, whether it's a painting or a limited edition print or a limited edition NFT or timed edition or open edition, depending on their circumstances. I think that's important to have art in your home and in your living space. And so I try to keep my work accessible. So as of late, I haven't really done any unique pieces or one-of-ones, and I do a lot of editions, whether it's a limited edition, which is limited by number, or timed edition, which is limited by time. I also have an open edition or an unlimited edition that exists forever, and that's around like $10, $15. It's just because I truly believe that art brings so much joy and happiness and pushes people to, grow and learn about themselves, that people should be able to have artwork in their home. You shouldn't have to be like a multimillionaire to afford artwork, or pay to go to a museum to see artwork. So that's something that's really important to me, and that is the driver behind a lot of what I do within this space and how I share my work. So at least in the United States, we're in a bit of a bear market and things are tough, but people still want to have artwork and collect artwork. So I pivot towards doing things that are a bit more accessible. Because I think it's just important for people to have that joy in their lives, if it's something that they want. So that's really kind of how I decide what to release and when, and what collections I work on.
It's also a great Web3 onboard opportunity, whether or not that is your objective. I do think that having great work that you can be proud to hold, that doesn't cost a bunch of money and that you're not necessarily speculating on, is a really great way to bring curious minds into the space and have them feel proud of what they have. And even just thinking now as you're speaking, it's a great way to gift people NFTs too, and obviously as we all kind of share our passion for the space and for the work that we're interested in, it just spreads that awareness and the brands of those artists and all of those things. So I think that's wonderful. I do hear that, especially more for the folks who are, I hate minimizing their purchasing to simply speculation, but it does sound like some folks do need to do their own research when it comes to different types of editions. Certainly, it seems some folks don't necessarily understand the difference between an open edition, a timed edition, a limited edition, or whatever. And so I think for those listening, those are important terms for you to kind of get to know, I think, when you're looking at art for art's sake. So that way you know what you're buying. But nonetheless, buy what you like, I think is a good.
I know. And it's so funny too, because I think as a lot of artists enter the space, having people speculate on you successfully or unsuccessfully is a very odd feeling. What? I just want people that like and resonate with that piece. If they want to collect it and they could afford to collect it, collect it. Or if you can't, you can admire it from afar. So that's definitely, and there's nothing wrong with folks that speculate. People speculate in so many different types of markets, whether it's a digital good or a physical good. People have Hermes Birkin bag collections that they speculate on, live your life. But I think that the interesting nuance in Web3 is that the lack of accountability for that. It's you blame the person that created the object, versus taking accountability for your decision making on how you spend your money. And again, I think over time, as this becomes more mainstream and people collect digitally like they collect things physically, I think that will fall by the wayside, and people that do speculate on different markets will take accountability for that speculation. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just right now it feels interesting for people that, like you said, maybe are still learning about editions, to come in with the ego that they know everything, and then get upset at a creator because their speculation didn't go as planned in such a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very interesting kind of nuance to in person to kind of communicate with, because
Mm-hmm.
it's, you have empathy for somebody that made a decision that didn't go well, but you're also like, no one's forcing you
Yeah.
to collect these things. So it's definitely an interesting, and like I said, I think that will change as time goes on. But for a lot of artists too, because it's a tough thing to talk about. Because like we're all so grateful that so many people resonate with our work and want to collect our work, and like I don't want the negative aspect to outshine that beautiful, incredible thing. But I think if we want more artists to be vulnerable and share their work, and put their work up for sale in this space, I do hope that those that do speculate take on a little more self accountability and
Mm-hmm.
don't put it on an artist, because
Mm-hmm.
then we're, hindering ourselves from being exposed to so much great art because people are
Mm-hmm.
going to be afraid to share
Mm-hmm. And
their work.
I don't know if it was yourself or I had seen the conversation at some point recently. Artists have always had the opportunity to offer their work in different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you go to a museum and you see a piece hanging on the wall. You might go into the gift shop
Like at a
and find,
museum print. Yeah.
yeah, and you might see it, on a mug or a notebook
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, right? And there's different entry points basically to be able to enjoy that artist's work. And so I do wonder, and to switch gears a little bit on the technical side, in case anyone's wondering. So if you are wanting to put your physical pieces on chain, obviously, for those who've been listening for a little while, know that an NFT can represent ownership, right? Like that really is, in many ways, could be a receipt. So if you have a physical piece, this might very well be the receipt that kind of comes along with it. But for an artist who wants to take a physical piece and digitize it in a way, and this is probably like a really silly question now that
No
I'm saying it
questions
out
are
loud,
silly. No,
but
no,
like
no.
people have probably been creating digital work from their physical work for a long time, just not on chain, right? So what steps go into that? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So for me, like say I have a painting. I don't have any paintings dry right now, but I say I have a painting that I want to make an edition from. Usually pre NFTs, I could make a limited edition. I could make an open edition. Depending on what I want to do. If I want that piece to be reproduced as a screen print, I'll make that decision. I'll high-res scan it in and then work with whoever I have to work with to get that made. With NFTs, I high-res scan in my work or photograph my work, and then I'm like, I want to make an edition of this, and this edition will live digitally instead of physically. And being able to use different platforms. My favorite thus far is Manifold. It makes it
Mm-hmm.
very easy to use on your own. You
Mm-hmm.
watch a few videos that they do video tutorials, and like in a few hours, you could mint your own edition or your
Mm-hmm.
own one of one, or
Mm-hmm.
depending on what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I just scan it in, and then I'll edit anything. Sometimes my scanner has dust on it, so I'll edit anything out from the image, and then I'll just use Manifold to mint it and make an edition. I
Mm-hmm.
think Manifold introducing the idea of time editions and open editions is really awesome because it's
Mm-hmm.
another layer of accessibility. In the physical world, open editions, I always use like causes, like vinyl sculpture toys. Open editions are just kind of like open-ended. You don't know the edition number. It's not unlimited because obviously you're not making an unlimited number of toys, but it's kind of open-ended and it's a lot more accessible. So, instead of paying millions for a painting by cause, you could get a sculpture for a couple $100.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice because you have it in your home. I think
Mm-hmm.
for NFTs, an open edition is a little bit different because it can be unlimited. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of critique to that is well, what happens if the world ends? It's like, I think we have bigger problems if the
Yeah.
world is ending than like the fact that the edition is closed because of the end of humanity.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's another great way for it to be accessible for people because it just lives on indefinitely. And then same thing with timed editions, that the edition is limited by time. So instead of an artist putting a number to it, they could say, hey, this is open for 5 minutes or this is open for a few days, and whoever wants one can receive one. And that's really nice because a big learning curve for me, not only as a collector, but also as an artist, is You want a limited edition, you pay the couple bucks in gas fees, or, back in the day, a couple $100 in gas fees. And then you get nothing because somebody else beat you to it. That was always a really frustrating experience. And the timed edition alleviates that. So if you want to mint one, you'll get one, and no questions asked. You don't have to worry about losing out. So I really love how Manifold does these different paths to accessibility, which is really cool. And a lot of it parallels printmaking, and how printmaking revolutionized how painters can make their work more accessible, I think. This is doing the same way. So the long answer to your question is I scan it in and I use Manifold.
And then what happens to the original? How do you
Yeah,
typically
so
treat them?
I usually keep them. I have an archive. A lot of my work is smaller, so I'll hold on to the original. I do think over time, and I experimented this with, I did like a book pre-order thing where the edition was an animated version of a painting, and then the one of one did get randomly sent to someone that did pre-order my book. That was interesting to kind of play with what an edition of that piece looks like and what a like one of that piece looks like. I think that might be kind of confusing on chain right now in the long term, but for something that was tethered to my book, I figured it was a good experiment. But for now, I hold on to them.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on intellectual property when it comes to your work. Again, this is very different than some of these early large scale 10,000 piece PFP collections where people are maybe looking to build out a brand and culture with apes or fame ladies or whatever. And so I know that you have something coming up where you're looking at CCO. Maybe you could talk a little bit just about how you're thinking about IP as you're living in this space.
Yeah, I think IP is something that's really complex. For me as an artist, a lot of my income comes from licensing. So retaining my IP is incredibly important. I think any artist that wants to dabble commercially, always retain your IP as best as you can, unless they're paying you a boatload to have that IP transfer, which has happened. It happens like once or twice so far where you're like, okay, you can own it, thank you. But usually you want to maintain your intellectual property and then license out that work. So when the CC0 trend became very popular, where you're no rights reserved for a lot of artists, I'm like, I can't do that for all my work. That would be insane. I couldn't do that at all. So it really depends on you as an artist and your practice, like what makes most sense to you. Another thing that I find important is like a lot of artists that were fully putting their entire portfolio as no rights reserved. A lot of them were men, and that was an interesting observation that I've had, because usually female artists get written out of art history. You hear of, like Kandinsky, but you don't hear of like Hilma A.F. Klimt, and that happens a lot, and that pattern repeats itself. So to fully, give over the one thing that I have over my work was tough, especially being a woman in the arts. And that was something that caused me to have pause as well. I don't know, by the time this comes out, it'll probably already have come out, but tomorrow, Wednesday the 8th, I'm doing a timed edition of a piece that I am going to do a CC0 because it was inspired by some outputs that I was creating when I was tinkering with AI. And I felt that, AI pulls from the infinite to create artwork, and that inspired the painting that I made. And I kind of wanted to give that painting back out infinitely. And I thought that had a really nice thematic tie to it. I could do it for all my work for the reasons that I mentioned, but I felt like for this piece, because it's inspired by artificial intelligence, it felt fitting thematically to put that back out there for others to be able to play with and use and reinterpret in their own way. So I'm excited about it. I try to be very thoughtful with these things and try not to hop on trends. I feel like the trend for CC0 was like a year ago. So I try not to do it because it's a trend, but if it makes sense for me and my practice and the work itself, I'll consider it. So that's important.
So just for folks who are listening who may not fully understand, like if they were to purchase a piece of yours and that CC0 is being offered, what can they do with that work?
So even if you don't purchase the piece, you can live your life with it. If you want to make it your logo, which I wouldn't suggest making a painting a logo, but that's the designer in me. You could do that. You could put it on anything. So like I held no rights to it. Obviously, the purchasing of the artwork is more of like collecting an edition directly from me, where it's like, you're supporting me in my practice by collecting it. But it lives out for people to use and remix and remake however they see fit. So I'm excited to see what comes of it. It's definitely, as an artist that is very intentional about the work that I put out and the work that I make, a little nerve-wracking too, to see how others reinterpret it. But I remind myself that even the work that I don't have, which is all of my other work besides this piece, that I don't have available, for people to use freely, people still, will make derivatives of it anyway. So I think that this is a kind of like a nice way to see what comes of it in a way that feels right thematically to me.
And so the flip side with some of your more typical work, like some of the pieces that I have collected. And again, this is kind of like the naive question. And I know I reached out to you after I bought. It's like, can I print this? Am I allowed to enjoy this? Like,
yes.
For
And
personal,
I can't speak for most artists because, like, everybody's got different uses. But like a lot of people ask me that. They're like, "Can I print it? Because I see you sell prints of it too." I'm like, "Yes. If you bought the NFT and you want it printed huge, go for it." I think that's the beauty of another beauty of NFTs is like, if you want something that's a lot bigger than the scale of the painting itself and you want to put it in your home, or I can imagine like, if you have kids and you're like, I don't want to put a real painting up and my kid just with crayon, which I would have done as a child. Like this is a way for you to have something that's either an edition or an original if it's a one of one, but then still display a copy of it in your home, knowing that you have the original, but you can display the copy. So yeah, anyone that has ever bought anything of mine as an NFT can feel free to reproduce it. A lot of people ask me where. I like FrameBridge. I think they do really beautiful print and frame job in various sizes. That's my preference, but you can also go to a local print shop and a local framer and support, local business as well, to have something, reproduced and hung in your home. It would mean the world to me. I think the fact that people go out of their way to print and hang it in their home is really humbling. So, yeah.
And just to be clear, that's for personal use, not for commercial redistribution, everybody.
Yeah. You can't like sell it. That would be a different problem. But to hang in your home is a very flattering thing.
Yeah. I have a couple things I want to ask you before we go. I'm just realizing the time. And
I talk a lot. I'm sorry.
No, I'm definitely the same. It's all good. And I don't know if this topic is like kind of a cliche one to cover at this point, but it's just not one we've discussed much on this podcast. And really that's about creator royalties. So I'm happy to get into the debate of creator royalties, but more, I think what I want to talk about is like where are royalties today, and what does it mean for artists? And I'm thinking of this in particular so people understand the sort of on-chain mechanism, like some of the value of work being available on blockchain. So maybe in your words, can you just help us understand creator royalties?
Yeah, so creator royalty is every time an NFT is sold on the secondary market, the creator will receive a percentage of that sale. And this is something that it exists, I believe. Anyone that's listening that lives in the EU could correct me, but I believe there are laws in place where, if you sell an artwork on the secondary market, the artist has to receive a percentage of sales. In the United States, there is no protection like that. So this is kind of nice because it allows an artist to, partake in their long-term growth. If I make a piece when I'm 30, and then, if the stars align, and when I'm 50, that piece sells for, $10 million, pie in the sky, I can get a percentage of that instead of the collector being the one that, greatly receives, a pat on the back and a lot of money for guessing correctly. The artist, the one that made the work, can also participate in that amazing sale as well. So it's really incredible to be able to have that on chain and have that tracked. The debate, which I feel like it comes and goes. I'm like, good, no one's talking about this anymore, like in a negative sense, like, let's just let it rest. The debate is like, should creators receive royalties? A lot of people skirt royalties because it can't really be enforced on chain people that are technologists can go back and forth on the nuances of that. But from an artist perspective, a lot of people will skirt royalties. I see it, which is interesting because I could see access to any NFT that I've minted and how it sells. So it's always funny to see people skirting that and then tweeting about how much they love you as an artist. And you're like, okay. So I think that for me as an artist, secondary sales are always really lovely when people, decide, oh, I want a different piece of yours. So I sold this and now I'm buying this piece. But for me, I don't rely on secondary sales as a heavy means of income. With that said, I think anything in terms of making money off of my work is better than nothing. And that was a big argument that I saw people saying. It's like, you're only making a couple of dollars. Like, you're not making that much a month. Like, what's it matter? And it's like, well, that little amount does add up over time. And it's kind of nice to partake in that because I'm the one that made that work. I think the thing is, like, if it's something that you're collecting and you see that the royalty is set, if it's something that you're uncomfortable with, agreeing to when you sign to collect that NFT, then I would say your best bet is to probably give pause and not collect that NFT to begin with, instead of trying to skirt the royalties in the after when you want to sell it. Some people have proposed solutions where the person collecting it pays the royalty because they're buying into that artist or buying into that collection or project. If you're talking about projects, that's an interesting solution. But I do think creator royalties are something that are really nice. Again, we're supporting artists and creators while we're still here, and we get to continue to give love to them and support them in a way that without this technology would be a lot more difficult, if not impossible. So I'm a big fan.
Yeah. No, of course, and I think from the blockchain, we're big supporters too. I think there is a conversation for businesses being built in this way, and certainly it's probably not sound to rely heavily on secondary royalties or creator fees. But as an artist, I think a lot of the sort of passion for seeing art on chain, especially early days, was just that it does empower the artist. It allows the artist to really look at this as more of a full-time thing that they might be able to do. And it might be new in the art world, but it's not necessarily new in the creative world necessarily. Like, folks who are actors get residuals when their shows are on repeat.
One of my best friends is a voiceover actor, and they get royalty residuals. I think that's a term. Anytime their spot is played or renewed, and it's kept track of. And I was like, I want that. Pre NFTs, I was like, that's amazing. I get royalties when I do a licensing deal with a company, but usually that's limited and not re-upped all the time. So when things are a little bit more fluid, it's very nice because it's helpful.
Yeah. And just for our audience sake, I know for those of you who've been collecting NFTs for some time, you're familiar with this conversation. But for those of you who haven't, as of right now, it's not really built into the tech necessarily. So the royalty or creator fees are things that you find on secondary markets that are built into their processes. So, and become kind of automated or possibly removed. And then of course people have the opportunity to do private sales, and that's where these things can be skirted. So that's the types of things that are going on in the space. But, Amber, should ask you my ChatGPT question.
Yes, I was waiting. I was like, if any of these were already a ChatGPT one, they sounded great.
Oh no, I will ask you. And it's so funny. I find that when I ask it, I don't usually rewrite what they've given me, what ChatGPT has given me, but it tends to give me two-parted questions. So I'm going to read it, and then I'll maybe read the beginning again for you. So it says, as an established visual artist in the Web3 space, what is your vision for how the intersection of technology and art will evolve in the coming years? And how do you see NFTs playing a role in shaping the future of art as we know it? So the first question is, what is your vision for how the intersection of tech and art will evolve in the coming years? Any thoughts on that?
First of all, thanks, ChatGPT, for established. I always like that. I like to remind people that it's we're all very early days. No one's really established. Yes, there's some people that have made tens of millions, but I appreciate it, ChatGPT. Thank you. I think over time, the intersection of art and technology will allow not only art to become more accessible to people that want to collect art in various forms, but also encourage more artists to be able to support themselves off of their work full time. Mm-hmm. It's definitely a grind to be a freelance artist, especially before the world of Web3. And I think that Web3 allows a new way for artists to share their work, to folks that want to collect it, and to create a community around their work and a dialogue around their work in a way that hasn't existed before. So hopefully artists will be able to have, in-person events that also have, digital counterparts to them for folks that don't live near where they are. It allows more accessibility for people to collect an artist's work. The artist could live in Los Angeles, like me, but then you can have someone collect the work that lives, in Hong Kong, and it just allows for more connection and championing and sharing of art, across the globe. So my hope is that it becomes more accessible and, more championed as time goes on.
Mm-hmm. The second part of the question, I think you've covered it, but in case there's any nuance specific to NFTs, I'm going to read it. It says, how do you see NFTs playing a role in shaping the future of art as we know it? Is there any sort of addition to your comments with that part of the question?
Provenance has been a big thing in art. People can counterfeit paintings, and it's like, oh, what paint and what type of canvas would that painter have used at that time period? And then they can full on rip off work. This makes it a lot easier to prove that this work was made by this artist at this period of time. Mm-hmm. So even if it's tethered to a physical, there are a lot of new pieces of tech coming out where you can embed a specific chip into a painting and or a drawing that tethers to an NFT. It just makes provenance a lot easier to prove that, yes, this artist had that wallet name at that period of time. They minted it. Cool. This is legit. So that will make it a lot easier, I think, than trying to under a microscope, look at the type of paint and the type of, fibers and pigments. And, I think it'll just make it easier for everybody, which is nice, because I think then that what you're looking at came from that artist, which I think is really special.
Mm-hmm. I weirdly think it's also going to be interesting just to see the lineage of who owned it generally.
That too. Yeah, exactly.
Right. There's some, some people may care more or less than others, but for those who care, I think it's going to be interesting to be like, I collected this piece that so-and-so had collected before, and somehow that gives me some extra value, or at least gives me a story to tell that I can, brag about around, I don't know, at a cocktail party or something like that. I think that's really neat.
Definitely.
Yeah. So there's lots of other things I'd love to get into with you, but I also know time is up. You're just such a wonderful inspiration. You're a champion for women in the space, and in art in general. That's from my perspective. I think that you're just adding so much value to so many of us. Before we leave, maybe you can share with us how we can find you. And we will put this in the show notes, so you don't have to spell it all out. And the other thing I meant to ask earlier is maybe mention a couple of fun partnerships or collaborations that you think are worth knowing about, because I can put those links in the show notes as well.
Oh, yeah. So you can find me on social media at Amber_Vittoria. It's spelled B as in Victor, Ittoria. There is no C. It is Italian, and it means victory. And that's why if you go to Italy and you see a lot of Vittoria cafes, I don't own those. That's just a very common word. One of my old bosses, they're like, do you own a cafe chain in Italy? And I was like, no, I do not. That sounds great though. So you can find me on social media, also my website, ambervittoria.com, which is where you can see a lot of the client work that I've done in the past and collaborations I've done. I've got a cool one coming out in March that I can't talk about yet. That I worked on what feels like forever ago, but it was a year and a half ago. So I'm excited about that, and you'll definitely see me, shouting from the rooftops about it in March. But yeah, you can find everything about me on my website.
Very cool. Very cool. We actually just had a chat with Sarah Bauman, and I know you just did a fun collaboration with her. I don't know if these episodes will come out back to back, but it's fun to hear from both of you. Such strong women in the space. I will leave it at that. Amber Vittoria, thank you so much for being on From the Blockchain. Your story is important. We're really happy to be sharing it here. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us on From the Blockchain. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you have any questions about today's episode, please send us a message so we can answer it. If you want to learn more about Fame Lady Squad or how you can get involved with NFTs, please visit our website or join our growing community on Discord. We genuinely believe we couldn't do the things we do without the support of our community and listeners like you. So thank you. We'll see you again soon.